Grace to you and peace from God the Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Let the people of God say, Amen. One more candle and then it'll be Christmas, but we have a ways to go yet. And today, of all days, we actually find John the Baptist in prison. See, I was saying last week how Matthew, during this time of Advent, kind of jumps back and forth, right? He starts with the end of the world. And then today we have John in prison. Now we are in the middle of Jesus' ministry. He's out there doing stuff. And John is sitting in jail wondering about it. And then next week we get Mary finding out that she's pregnant. I mean, there's nothing chronological whatsoever in these readings during Advent. But they all make a point, right? And today the point is that when you sit in prison and you're cut off from everything and everybody, you kind of get second thoughts. And isn't that what John is having? He's having second thoughts. That was the wrong one. He's having second thoughts. He's in prison. And you know, in prison it's lonely and you kind of wonder whether you got it right the first time around. And so he's asking some questions, you know, is Jesus really the one? Or should I wait for another one? Did I give the right message when I was out there in the desert baptizing people? You know, I thought he was the one to usher in God's kingdom, but was I wrong? Second thoughts, doubts. Now, this is a little strange to me, I think, because, I mean, think about this. John the Baptist was there when Jesus was baptized. He is the one who did the baptizing, right? And wasn't there this bird that came down from heaven, this dove, and then this booming voice about, this is my son? I mean, how could you have any doubts after that? I mean, if God came into my life and boomed around like that, I wouldn't have any doubts either, right? And yet here is John the Baptist having second thoughts. And he is one of the people who should know better. But isn't that an experience that we all share? Don't you have doubts? Don't you wonder at times whether this Christian story really is true? And whether there really is a God? And so often in our lives when stuff happens, it just feels like God isn't there at all. Or maybe he's just really absented himself and doesn't care anymore and is hiding away somewhere in the furthest corner of the universe. Doesn't it feel like that sometimes? Somebody say yes. Because it feels like that to me sometimes. And so then I have second thoughts and I doubt and I think, could this really be true? Is Jesus really the one we should look for? Here's a great quote I found from Brian Stoffridgen, whom I like. If Jesus is the one who comes, or should we look for another? John's question is not answered with a simple yes or no. The answer can only come from faith. Like John in prison, we can only hear reports about what Jesus is saying and doing. We hear it through the words from the Gospels. Will we believe in our hearts the reports from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, or not? Will these reports create metanoeo? That's the Greek word for a change of thinking about God, ourselves, and the world in us. Will we believe in our hearts and in our lives Jesus is called to continue his work on earth? See, that's the point of Advent, right? Hearing the word, believing the word, and then having that word make a difference in our lives, changing our lives, turning our lives around, because Jesus' message is that the kingdom of heaven has come near, that God's reign has broken in, right? That's the promise of Advent, is that God is coming. Jesus is about to be born, and the world is going to turn around, and nothing will be the same. And yet, it hasn't really happened yet, or has it? See, this is one of those things that Luther talks about. Luther is famous for saying two things at the same time, right? He says we're all sinners and we're all saints at the same time. He says there is the law and the gospel at the same time, and they're always kind of in tension with each other. And one of those famous Lutheran paradoxes is that God's kingdom has already come, because Jesus has come, he's been here, right? He did his ministry on earth, and then he left, and he promised to come again. God's kingdom has already come, and yet it is still on the way. It's already here, and it's not yet. And this already not yet dynamic is what plays out with John in prison today. Because he knows the kingdom is here. He's seen it. He's been part of it. He's been the forerunner. He's been the messenger, getting people ready for it. And yet here he is, locked up in jail all by himself, wondering whether it really has come or whether it's still on the way. Luther said it this way: we are not yet what we shall be, but we are growing toward it. The process is not yet finished. The process is not yet finished. So this kingdom that's already here and that's still coming, it's a process. And it's never just a straight line going from A to B, right? There are some second thoughts in between there. There are some doubts there. There are some detours sometimes that we have to navigate through on our journey. Now, meanwhile, there are some outward signs that the kingdom is really real and is really coming and is already here. Jesus talks about that when John sends his friends to ask, are you the one? What does Jesus answer? He says, see for yourself. Look at the evidence, right? The blind see and the lame walk and the poor have good news and the dead are raised. I mean, all these dramatic things that Jesus is doing. His miracles, those are the outward signs of the kingdom. And for us, those signs may be a little less dramatic. We don't have Jesus physically right here feeding 5,000 people in front of our eyes or healing someone who is sick and making a lame person walk. We don't have that, but we do have the word of the Gospels and the witness of the evangelists. Those are the outward signs for us. And then we have outward signs of the kingdom of heaven in our own lives. Every time there's a healing, every time there's a blessing in your life, that's an outward sign of God's presence, Jesus' presence, that the kingdom of heaven is already here. So today I want you to take just a minute. I want you to turn to one another, take 3 minutes and tell each other what are the outward signs of the kingdom of heaven in your lives. Go. I hate to interrupt your conversations, but I hope that you've gotten just a quick glimpse of what some of those signs, some of those blessings are in the lives of your neighbors. I want to share 4 outward signs that I've experienced in this very church just very recently. Right? A week ago, we had a wonderful Christmas concert with the Triangle Alliance Choir That's a chorus of adults with disabilities. And they did a wonderful job bringing the message of joy, love, and peace to all of their audience. Just yesterday, this room was filled with families and children, the children being adopted through the Lutheran Services Carolina's adoption program. Every year they come here, have their Christmas party, and those gifts that you all brought to the angel trees, that's when they get distributed. And this room was just buzzing with blessing all day long. And it was all these outward signs, hundreds of them literally, of God's presence. Meanwhile, we were part of the Cary Christmas Parade, and we gave out invitations to our Christmas services, like 2,000 of them, and we marched through the street with a manger scene, and the kids were dressed up, and it was a wonderful witness, a wonderful outward sign of God's presence. And we recently completed yet another Habitat for Humanity, a house, a very, very, very concrete outward sign, particularly to the mother, the single mother with 3 kids, who is moving in there, hopefully still before Christmas. We are going to dedicate this house very early in January. You can see that all of those outward signs combine to make a difference in the world, right? To turn the world around, to turn the world from darkness into light, to turn the world from sinfulness into righteousness, to turn the world from a God-forsaken place to a place where God is present and promises us a promise of a bright future. The world is about to turn. That's the promise of Advent, because God, who is already here, is about to come again and make a difference in our lives.